The first thing we see here from verse 22 is that we are called to work sincerely for man. We are called to work sincerely for man. Bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters. The word there for obey is the same that we saw before. Children, obey your parents. Paul is just continuing an application of Christ, the exalted one, for the family. Chapters 1 and 2 were all about how Christ is the preeminent one. He is the supreme authority. He's the head of all creation. He's the head of the church. Now he's applying it as we continue to think about the family, from the marriage to the parenting. Now servants. Servants would have been in the household. We see that for the servants, and I think for us as employees, as workers and laborers, we're supposed to obey. And the scope is universal. Obey in everything. If you have a boss, a manager, an employer, God has blessed you with that job, and He has blessed you with that employer. God has blessed you with that job. And whatever comes with that job, God has blessed you with that as well. I had decided to go to Liberty University, and then I found out you're supposed to wear a tie every day. So I told my mom, I don't think I'm supposed to go there. So she said, if God called you to Liberty, He called you to wear a tie. Whatever God has called us to, He's called us to every consequence of that calling. So if He's called you to your job, He's called you to every complication, frustration, and difficulty within that job, and He's called you to be obedient, to be submissive, and to work wholeheartedly. The first thing we can see here that we really should be trustworthy. We have to be trustworthy at work. We have to be good Christians in the workplace. It means we don't steal. We don't steal things from work. We don't take things from our workplace. We also don't steal time. We don't waste time at work. Whenever we are there, we are committed to giving our full energy to that occupation. We are to obey in everything. We're not to steal time. We're not to goof off. We're to be committed with our whole energy to the workplace. Do people know you as a Christian at work? Do they recognize that you work hard as a Christian? First, if they don't know you're a Christian at work, there's a whole other conversation to have. Why don't they know you're a Christian at work? Is there not enough evidence of grace in your life that they wouldn't know you're a Christian at work? If they know you're a Christian at work, do they see you modeling submissiveness and obedience and a happy heart and faithfulness? What is your reputation at work? Are you the hardest worker? Are you easy to get along with? The second thing is that we're not just supposed to be honest and trustworthy at work. We're to be happy. Now that's a little harder than the mere obedience of not doing something, such as stealing. Paul says here, not by way of eye service as people pleasers. We're not just there to appear to do a good job. We're not just there to do what people can see us as doing a good job. We're actually there to have a sincere heart. Sincerity of the heart. A singleness of heart. We're supposed to be happy at work. This means you don't just go through the motions of obedience. You actually have to say, I want to obey. You have to train your heart to say, I want to do this job. We're called to obey not the human eyes that are watching us, but the omniscient, omnipresent eye. The eye that sees everything. The eye that sees not just the final work of the project, but the eye that saw your heart during the project. A real concrete example of this is that if you're a janitor, you don't just sweep around the rug, you sweep under the rug. You see the difference? So if we had a janitor and I was in charge of him, I would walk around and I would inspect his work. I'm not going to lift the rug. But he would want to obey God. He would want to clean in such a way that God saw everything. And God sees the dirt that we do not see. We're supposed to serve the one who can see everything. If you're a businessman, you do not work just for the end result. You work to worship God. You do everything in a way that is pleasing to Him. If you're a teacher, your job is not just to turn grades in. Your job isn't just to satisfy your boss. Your job is to develop and train children. Your job is to invest in them, to commit to them, their well-being. Notice here, he also says, out of fear of the Lord. Fear is, better translated really is reverence. Obey your earthly masters out of reverence for the Lord. This is how we see that it's worship. You're to obey your earthly master as reverence. Out of your love for God, out of your worship for God, you are to obey your master, your earthly master. Now, obedience, especially the kind of obedience we're talking about here, it requires that you first honor them. Now, we've all, I assume, if we're self-employed now, we've all had a manager or a boss that was difficult to honor. Bosses are complicated. Bosses are difficult. The employee-boss relationship is always complicated, and that's because we're all sinners. But the issue here is we're supposed to obey them in all things, and I think that necessarily requires that we honor them. You have to intentionally think much of them because God has put them in that position of authority, and God has put us under them who have that position of authority. The first thing we see is we're supposed to obey our earthly masters, our earthly bosses, our earthly managers, in a way that isn't just pleasing them according to what they see. We're to please them according to what God will see, the full work in our complete heart.